Aloha and welcome to Figments, the Power of Imagination. This is season 1, episode 2. He says grandiosely. The whole idea of the show is to inspire you and entertain you, and I think we're really going to do that today. First, I'll talk about a figment of my own. Every golfer, I think, has a figment when they walk up to the tee on a par 3 of, well, either a dream, making hole in one, or a nightmare, putting it in the water, the sand, whatever the hazard is. So bring up my picture from Saturday. My dream came true. Number 2 at Mamala Bay, 179 yards. And it was a figment. Then it became real. And it makes up for every bad shot I've made. And there are millions of them. So enough about that figment. We've got a great show today, a great guest, an old friend, and somebody you'll really enjoy getting to know. The intro is simple. It's General Dave Goldfein, retired U.S. Air Force Chief of Staff, and he's going to talk about a figment consistent with our theme here, where we take something that resided in the imagination and make it real. And he did that. And reminder: here's the definition of a figment, and actually here's Dave Goldfein, fingers. My good friend, the retired 21st Chief of Staff of the Air Force. He served for 37 years and was a fighter squadron commander, group commander, twice wing commander, combat in Desert Storm and Operation Allied Force. Now he's in San Antonio, Texas, and he says he's liking retirement a lot. Aloha, General Goldfein.
Hey, aloha, Pig. Thanks for having me.
Oh, pleasure. And we have a lot of connective tissue. We could take an hour just discussing our connective tissue.
Amen.
And it kind of starts with a squadron of some repute, the world famous, highly respected triple nickel that we both got to command, right?
Yep. Amen. Yep.
And
there's
no squadron like it. And that was long before you stood up and testified or sat down and testified to get confirmed as the 21st Chief of Staff. But
and
to
me, and a lot more fun, can I just say?
Oh yeah, nothing like it. And as I thought about that, to me, Dave Fingers, you are every man's fighter pilot, every woman's colleague, coworker, fighter pilot. There's a humble, common person to you that we all admire. And I have to ask you, when you first sat in the office of the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, in charge of the whole darn thing, and sat behind the desk, did you ever have a fleeting figment that maybe somebody would catch you and ask you what the heck you were doing in there?
I actually lived in constant fear, especially during my confirmation hearing, that Chairman McCain would raise a piece of paper, lean forward in the microphone and say, "Hey, General Goldfein, I happen to be holding the transcript from your Air Force Academy days. Are you kidding me?"
You were class of 83 at the Academy?
Actually, I joke. I was the class of 81, 82, and 83. I was the John Belushi of the Air Force Academy.
And that's what I wanted to allude to, was the 81, 82, 83. But you were the top graduate in philosophy, as I recall. And I only know this because you told me.
Number one of one.
One of one. And I think you also told me you were marching tours, a form of punishment that we didn't have at the University of Wisconsin, right up to graduation.
As a matter of fact, I had to call my physics instructor to ask whether he would share with me whether I was going to pass and graduate, because I was planning on getting married the next day. And I asked him, I said, "Hey, sir, if you don't mind just telling me right now if I flunked and I'm not going to graduate, I can save my family a lot of money, a lot of hassle." And he said, "Well," he goes, "I got good news and bad news there, Cadet Goldfein." He said, "The good news," he goes, you're going to graduate, you passed, you can get married." He said, "The bad news is you will never return to the academy as a physics instructor."
Well, you weren't planning to do that anyway, right?
No.
Because you come from a distinguished family of fighter pilots. Your dad was an icon of the fighter community. He'd served in Vietnam in the world famous, highly respected triple nickel. And as I recall, when you pinned on Colonel, was there over 100 years of commissioned service in the room from the Goldfeins?
Sure was, yeah. Older brother Steve, who retired as 2-star general, acting director of the Joint Staff at the time, and my younger brother Mike, who retired active duties, lieutenant colonel, and went on to be a reserve F-16 instructor for many years.
Mm-hmm. What a
And now
family.
next generation is there with my daughter serving as an intelligence officer, and my nephew is at pilot training right now in at Shepherd, and my other nephew is a squadron commander flying Eagles.
Cool.
He's got the
Finally, a fighter
F-2.
pilot.
Yeah, that's
Because
right.
my background was mostly in F-15, so a little bit of rivalry there. And our connection started before we knew it started, because we were at Luke Air Force Base at the same time doing different things.
Yes.
I was requalifying in the F-15, and you were in your initial F-16 training. And do you remember the conversation we had in the Triple Nickel Bar at Aviano in December of 1998?
Boy, do I ever. Yeah. Yeah, when this guy lost his brakes in an F-15 and was coming right at me.
Yeah, so the way I remember, you said he was coming right at you, or no, you said, were you there at Luke when that happened? And of course, I said, was I there? Why, that was me. And I had lost all brakes and steering, and it should have been killed. And you are the only one who saw it. For 10 years, I didn't know how I survived, and then you enlightened me. And that's another 15, 20, 30-minute story best told with cold beverages. So we'll leave it there. And then we linked up again at Aviano Air Base in Italy, where you commanded the world famous, highly respected Triple Nickel, and had the joy of having a boss, me as a one-star wing commander, who had commanded the same squadron and took special interest in your work. That had to be fun.
Oh yeah, that was a blast, and I'm sure we'll get to it. We'll share with the listeners the great fig leaf quote after welcoming back from Serbia.
Yeah, we'll probably get to that. And you were, we had great leaders there.
Yes.
Really, Jeff Eberhardt, Dave Nichols, all the guys who came into squadron, and it was a time. I would suspect that many who view this today won't be aware or won't recall what a big effort Operation Allied Force was, because it was kind of in the background news. There were no ground troops. It was right about the time of the tragic Columbine shootings. It took up a lot of the media bandwidth, and so it didn't make a lot of news, but it was important. And I'll speak for you and me and the folks who served with us, because this is what I've heard. We felt like we're doing something right and important, and trying to stop ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, and it was so unique too, because you and I had discussed the fact that fighting from home, where our families lived, was not in the brochure, and so we had to work our way through that, and our spouses today, that went through that with us, their war stories are as good as anything we have to tell.
Yeah, it was a lot harder, I think, on them than on us, because we were doing something we believed in. And if you train to be a warrior for all of your life, you don't want war. But if it's there, you want to be in the game. If it becomes reality, you want to be involved in it. And we were in a unique way in a war where the principal application of military power was from the air. I think I picked words that won't irritate our Army guys too much, our Army friends too much, but it was the truth. Now, that was not your first combat experience, right?
Right. No, my career I was quite lucky, actually, because like you say, you never wish for war, but if there's one to be waged, you want to be part of it, because it's what you trained to do, and you want to do it with your values intact, and there's nothing better than leading a squadron into combat. And so I had the privilege of flying on the wing of an incredible warrior in Desert Storm, a guy named, I think we both know, Billy Deal. And Billy's. I remember my first time going into combat, and it's like every aviator who's ever gone in for that first time, it's the everybody's prayer, right? Don't let me screw this up.
Absolutely.
Don't let my buddies down, right? And you always sort of wonder, man, am I trained? Am I ready? And I'll never forget that first, trip across the line into Iraq in Desert Storm, and our lead, Billy Deal, and I was his deputy mission commander. he's calling out threats like it's a walk in the park. Of course, he's a Vietnam vet, MiG killer.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of us are green. And he says, hey, there's AAA, right 2 o'clock, which is anti-aircraft artillery. And we look down and we're looking at it. He says, okay, there's some, and he calls it out like there's SA-2s, surface to air missiles, left 10 o'clock. And we're watching these telephone poles come up at the formation. And then I hear a splash, MiG-29, and one of the Eagle guys, of course, shot down a MiG-29 in front of the package. And I remember that moment in my cockpit because I realized that what I was experiencing was not new. I had experienced almost everything I was seeing, hearing, feeling in Red Flag at Nellis Air Force Base.
Big training exercise for our non-Air Force viewers.
And so what I described very often using that experience as chief, I said, at the end of the day, that's one of our moral obligations as leaders is to produce confidence under fire. We got to produce that same moment that Captain Dave Goldfein felt because I had been trained well for what I was then asked to do. That's what we owe it to our young folks going forward. And so I became a huge believer in training hard and bleeding in training so you don't bleed in combat.
And that's as real as it gets, but you still can't totally dismiss the fear of screwing up, the fear of not being able to pass the test. And I didn't have that moment till I was one-star Aviano. And on my first real combat sortie, I'd flown some pseudo counters, not real demanding missions over Iraq during no-fly zone enforcement, but I was scared to death. And I was terrified that I wouldn't be able to do what I'd preached for, at that point, 25 years. Once you get through that, then all of that training, all of that realistic training, and the fine examples of guys like Billy Deal and all the other heroes we got to learn under comes through. But that first part, I was sweating it. So you were flying over Iraq, and with your last name being Goldfein, how did you feel about the potential of maybe being shot down and maybe captured in an environment that might not be so friendly?
So, it's fun to think back now on, how you approach things as a captain, right? And so, I was pretty confident that with a name like Goldfein, there would be no POW exchange for old Goldfein, right? So if I got hit, that was it. So I was either gonna walk out on my own, or I was not gonna make it out. So I got creative, like young captains do, and I decided that it would be far better odds for me if I replaced my parachute lowering device, which is what you normally have in the back, on your parachute, because there weren't that many trees in Iraq. So I replaced it with a complete head to toe Arab outfit, right? With everything from flip flops to Gutra, everything. And I talked the ID card folks into making me an ID card for combat. And I flew with my childhood and college musical hero, his name. So I actually flew combat as Harry Chapin the entire time. And luckily, I never had to use the card.
And we'll get back to that. And we're going to have to get to that soon. Some folks tuning in may have thought we were going to talk about the event in May of 1999 where you were shot down. And we've got a picture of some relics there. That's the tail of the squadron flagship and the canopy from your airplane when you were shot down and thankfully rescued. Worst phone call I ever got was first we lost an airplane. I was wing commander. It was about 1 a.m. Well, it was war, and we'd already lost an F-117. But when they told me it was you because of our friendship and because of your role as the squadron commander and with all the respect that you had. But if the next picture goes to the story you talked about, there's you after return with me and Jeff Eberhardt, one of the great combat leaders ever. We could do a whole show on him too.
Oh yeah.
But next to it is a picture you gave to me, and I didn't zoom in on it too much, but figures when you got back to Aviano, I did put my arm around your shoulder and say, I never got shot down when I was a triple nickel commander. Of course, I was a triple nickel commander in peacetime in Arizona, but I still never got shot down as the nickel commander. But all of these vignettes and figments aren't what I want to talk to you about, because there's one story that I only know part of that is really extraordinary. So there's a picture of you on a bicycle with a lot of hair.
Yeah.
And
getting back to that.
Yeah, I can't look at that too long, but the story I want to get to is I understand that you actually got time off from the Air Force Academy during your course of instruction to take a break and hit the road.
Yeah,
Tell
so
me
it was, let's just say it was a sort of a mutual decision by the Academy leadership and me that I was struggling academically. I was doing terribly in the military side of the house, but at least athletically, I was slow. So we made a mutual decision that I probably, on my current path, was not going to graduate and really need to go get my act together. So I actually quit the academy. Now, what they did, there were 10 of us who they called us in and said, we're going to try something new for U10. This is just where, luck, timing plays. They said, for U10, we think there's potential here. So if we're going to keep you a slot for you if you want to come back in a year. And on, I think it was March 28th or something like that, they said, you have to call back and tell us yes or no. Are you coming back? So my, I had mentioned that one of my passions growing up as a kid was music, and I'd learned to play the guitar, listening to Harry Chapin, James Taylor, John Denver, uh, Bob Dylan. And these guys were all my heroes, and Harry Chapin was especially my hero because I didn't know until I got to the academy that he went to the Air Force Academy, class of 1965. And he only lasted through basic training and then went off to Cornell, didn't do well at Cornell, and ended up driving a taxi in
one of his famous
New York
songs.
City.
Yeah, and if I could interrupt just for our viewers who aren't our age, we've got a short clip of his iconic song, Cats in the Cradle, and we'll just remind people, and this will be stuck in their heads for the rest of the day.
And the cat's in the cradle and a silver spoon, little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know when, but we'll get together then, son. You know we'll have a good time then.
And so that's stuck in everybody's head, but that's the guy you wanted to link up with, I guess.
Yeah, and so I ended up getting, through an academic advisor, a connection to a connection, I ended up actually getting a job as a roadie in Harry's band. And so I jumped on a 10-speed bicycle, that one in the picture, and left everything I owned, which was, fit into a backpack essentially, with my girlfriend at the time who lived in San Antonio, Dawn, and started pedaling to New England to join up with Harry's band. And I was actually 3/4 of the way there when he had his tragic car accident and we lost him. And so I found myself, traveling around the country on this bicycle. I ended up traveling for upwards of a year. And a funny thing happened, people took me in as I was traveling.
Yeah.
Found a dog along the way that traveled with me, rode on the bike, and I stayed in more people's homes. And I came to the conclusion that this country is worth defending. And those people that took me in, what we stand for as a nation, they were the heart of America, the back roads. So on March 28th, I called back to the academy and said, if you got a slot, I'll come back. And went back and finished up.
And they still are the heart of America. And I know there's a lot of pessimism, and it's been a tough year. Every year is a tough year in its own way.
Yeah.
The fig in me would say, suck it up, people. It's never easy, but people do make it tolerable. And, I had an opposite end, similar experience when I rode my Harley around the four corners of the United States to see the country that I defended. And it was the people. And they're wonderful. And they're wonderful regardless of any category you'd like to put them in.
Yeah.
So, it's important that we remember that. So you never met Harry Chapin. You still flew with his name on your shoulder.
Yeah.
And I understand, as I connected with you to talk about doing Figments, the power of imagination, got to put a plug in there. It turned out you had just had a Zoom call with his family.
You
How
know,
wild was that?
I had they just did a documentary on him that I happened to, somebody pushed to me and I got a chance to watch it. And his brother Tom and his son Jason were the architects of
Yeah.
this documentary. You know, we lost Harry 40 years ago. So, and this guy still has this incredibly outsized impact on his passions, which were world hunger and poverty. And so I thought it would be important for the Chapin family to hear a story of how their brother, father inspired this knucklehead cadet who who grew up to be chief of staff of the Air Force. And as I told them, I said, you know, your brother, you know, Harry, I've flown a lot of combat, done a lot of deployment. Don sent me off to war 4 times. And I said, I never went alone. I always had Harry with me. You know, he was either in my head or in my headset, and
So,
made a big difference.
yeah, and I think in your heart too, Fingers. And um, I didn't know much of it, the rest of his story, till we connected and I found out you talked to the family. I encourage all of our viewers, or both of our viewers, depending on how many we have today, to go to the Wikipedia page, because he was an incredible philanthropist, not just a musician, and it really remarkable. And the way this man was, this man whom you never met, is a lot of the way you are. And I don't know if that's karma, serendipity. This is what his epitaph is on his tombstone from one of his songs written in 1975. And so that's the inspiration for me. If you try to make a difference, to prove what your life can be, you'd be amazed what you can do, and amazed how much it can change the world. And I know that you've done that with your life, and I'm honored to know you and call you friend. So,
Well, same back at you, and I think the viewers should know that when it comes to combat leadership, it doesn't get better than fig leaf. And
well,
when I went on to have a chance to lead my own wings, um, I used to carry around this bracelet that says WWFD. That's all it said on it. And I would just look at it every once in a while and I said, what would Fig do?
really, well, that's touching. We had a great team. It was an incredible time. It always is. And it was the easiest job I ever had because of people like you and because of the cause. So I know you're going to do a lot for the world in your new life. I hope you'll enjoy it. I hope you get out to Hawaii. That is today's view back there. And we got about 28 more stories to share in detail, maybe with the audience in seasons 9 through 12 of Figments, the Power of Imagination. There's another plug for you. And Fingers, I hope you'll tune in to some of the things we've got coming up. So you can see we're going to have some two survivors talk about recovery, of keeping the dream of recovery alive. I've got a diplomat who will talk about dreaming of peace and dealing with North Korea. And then Susan Helms, who I'm sure you know is one of the most brilliant and wonderful people,
Wonderful.
a great astronaut, and then good friends of mine who took Figments to screen in Hollywood. So somewhere after that, we'll get you back on, or maybe we'll just get you and Dawn and I, and we can do our 3-part. This is the real story of your shoot down and rescue.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So we're about out of time for you. We've got a little more time for the show. Is there anything you'd like to close with? One more story about your life where you took something to reality that you didn't expect? Because I know you got a million of them.
Well, I would just say that, of all the blessings of being Chief of Staff of the Air Force, the greatest blessing for me is I got to do it with my best friend and my high school sweetheart, and for 37 years and 22 moves and 4 wars, she was by my side and still there, and so this has been a team effort, and we're just so honored to have had a chance to really to serve and to be servant leaders.
Well, Dawn is awesome. If you bring back the picture of the burnt tail and canopy of the F-16, and I'll tell my favorite Dawn story. You know this one already.
Yeah.
We were standing on the ramp at Aviano. You've been rescued in a very hot, opposed rescue with the helicopter shot up and some beautifully brave pararescuemen protecting you from that. That's a whole nother story. And now you're going to be brought back to your wife and kids' arms and back to us. And I always say, I had to throw this in there too, Fingers. You got off that MC-130, the airplane that brought you back after you were picked up by a helicopter, like you were getting off a cruise ship. And I don't know why that's the image that stuck, but there was a nonchalance of, okay, I've been shot down and rescued. And Dawn was next to me and she looked up to me. And that's one of the things I like most about Dawn is very few people look up to me physically. And she did. And she said, sir, what are they going to do with the airplane? Because the squadron flagship you'd ejected from and it landed in Serbia. And I said, what do you mean? So are they going to leave it there? They're not, are they? They're going to bomb it? Or are they going to go get it? Her husband's been shot down and rescued. But she's so committed that she wants to make sure the squadron flagship survives. And as I got ready to do this, I put some notices on Facebook. This talks to what you were saying about the strange nature of fighting from home. Do you remember what you told War Dog Henderson after you were shot down, rescued, and ready to go home?
No.
So apparently you were telling him, because he was sharing your squadron building with his F-15E
Yep.
squadron, right?
Right.
At Aviano. And you told him kind of the summary tale of the missile and the ejection and the escape and the pickup. And when you finished, said, and now I'm going to go home and do what every fighter pilot does after they've been shot down. And War Dog said, what's that? He said, you, Fingers, said, I'm going to go mow my lawn.
Yeah.
And that's you, an every man we believe in, and a great exemplar for us, a great friend for me, and hopefully an inspiration for everybody who's watching. Aloha, Fingers. God bless you.
Thanks. You too, Vic. Thanks.
Thanks for watching, folks. Be sure you click like and do all that other stuff that gets us street cred on YouTube and Vimeo. Aloha.